It was her mating season, and the human was the only one left in that planet. The sun burned low over the canyon edge, bleeding molten orange into a sky already laced with starlight. Cale knelt at the cliff's edge, his boots biting into the dry stone, hands cupped around a glowing crystal that pulsed like a second heart. Across from him, poised, silent, and watching, was the alien woman who had handed it to him. Her name was Onari. She knelt with her legs folded beneath her, back straight, hair catching the breeze in long green strands that shimmered like silk. Her skin, smooth, emerald, and warm even in the falling dusk, seemed to radiate life. Golden eyes locked onto his with a calm so absolute it rattled him. Her feline ears twitched at the wind, but her body never moved. She was waiting. Cale swallowed hard and said, "Just so I understand, this glowing thing you gave me, not a paperweight." Onari's voice was measured and melodic. "That is the crystal of Sikal. It reacts to shared potential." Cale lifted the crystal slightly, watching how the pulse aligned with his own heartbeat. "Potential for what exactly?" Onari said evenly. "Bonding. During the season I must offer it to a viable match. If accepted, it begins a rite of gradual connection, mental, physical, emotional." Cale looked up. "And if I don't accept?" Onari replied, "The season will pass, but not without consequence. My body will resist its cycle. That resistance causes damage." Cale nodded slowly, then asked, "What happens if I just hold it and freak out for a while?" Onari's lips pressed into something almost resembling a smile. "Then the crystal will wait, but not forever." Cale exhaled through his nose. The crystal thrummed again, growing warmer in his palms. The moment was dense, ritualistic, unnerving, and strange. But it wasn't just the unknown that made his chest tighten. It was her. Everything about her felt pulled from the kind of dreams you wake from too soon. Sculpted strength, wrapped in grace, with an intensity that left no room for doubt. But what struck him most was her restraint. She didn't beg, didn't lean forward, didn't so much as inch closer. She offered and waited. "I'm Cale," he said, his voice quiet. Onari nodded. "I know." Cale blinked. "You've been listening to my transmissions." Onari responded, "For days. You spoke to yourself often. I learned your name and your habits, and that you are frustrated." Cale coughed. "Yeah, that's fair." He glanced over the horizon where the desert stretched out like a broken ocean, red and empty. The colony evacuation had happened fast, faster than anyone predicted. When the sunstorms surged through the outer moons and took down half the communications grid, the Federation pulled all non-essential personnel. Cale's shuttle had taken damage on descent, and once the last evac left orbit, he was grounded. "Every other scavenger, miner, or officer got the hell off this rock a week ago," Cale muttered. "Me? I had a busted nav core and no backup comms. That's why I'm still here." Onari tilted her head. "You did not leave, even when you could." Cale looked at her. "You think I wanted to stay?" Onari said softly, "Your presence is what matters, not your reason." He watched her for a moment. There was something unnerving about how still she was, like a statue in worship, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt when she looked at him. Not fear, not confusion, something closer to gravity. Cale held up the crystal again. "So what happens if I say yes?" Onari answered. "The bond begins slowly. You will sense what I feel, in dreams first, later in instinct, and eventually, change." Cale raised an eyebrow. "Physical change?" Onari nodded. "Adaptation, small at first, internal. The crystal softens the transition." Cale rubbed the back of his neck. "So, basically, this is the part where I start glowing and mutating because a beautiful alien priestess decided I was compatible." Onari looked at him directly and said, "You are not unappealing." Cale froze, then huffed. That sounded suspiciously like a compliment. Onari's eyes narrowed slightly, in the faintest tease. "I am in season. Attraction is part of the rite. But I do not offer the crystal lightly. The bond would change me as well." Kale glanced down at the artifact pulsing between his hands. The glow was steadier now, warmer. You really can't just wait for someone else? Onari's tone lowered. There is no one else. My kind evacuated. I remained behind to complete a sacred cycle. It was poorly timed. You don't say, Kale muttered, but his tone wasn't mocking. He looked up again. Her chest rose and fell with a rhythm she clearly worked to keep steady. But he could see the effort. She was holding herself in check, not out of pride but respect, and maybe hope. Why me, Onari? Kale asked, not sarcastically this time. Why not wait it out alone? Her voice didn't waver. Because if I complete the season without a bond, I may not survive it. My body is not just in heat, it is in metamorphosis. The bond regulates the changes. Without it, my biology collapses inward. He blinked. You mean, it's lethal? She nodded once. Eventually, yes. The air thickened. He suddenly felt the weight of the crystal, not just in his hands but in his chest. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a lifeline, and she had trusted him with it. Kale looked up and said, I don't know what this means, not all the way, but I'm not letting you face this alone. Onari's gaze softened. Then place the crystal to your chest. Kale hesitated for only a second. Then, he pressed the base of the crystal over his sternum. The glow surged, sank into his skin like heat meeting water, then dimmed into a steady throb of light. Something changed. The air shifted. So did she. Onari exhaled, a single silent breath, and bowed her head slowly. The bond has begun. Kale stood there for a moment, heart pounding, skin warm. He looked at her, this alien woman who carried strength like ritual and spoke pain without flinching. And something stirred in his gut that had nothing to do with biology. It was connection, quiet, dangerous, real, and it had already begun. The desert night came fast. By the time they had descended into the canyon's edge, the heat was gone, replaced by a wind that cut through Kale's skin like dry ice. The stars above them blazed too bright, alien constellations hanging low and sharp, unfamiliar and endless. Onari led the way with silent precision, her bare feet gliding over loose rock as though the terrain obeyed her. Kale followed clumsily, still adjusting to the low light and the strange weight in his chest. The place where the crystal had faded into his skin hours ago. Kale muttered under his breath, "Should have brought a damn jacket." Onari, not turning back, said, "I warned you the nights here are unforgiving." Kale adjusted the makeshift cloth he'd torn from his pack and draped over his shoulders. "Yeah, but you didn't mention the part where I'd be glowing from the chest like a walking battery." She finally looked over her shoulder, her eyes catching faint reflections from the rocks. "That glow will fade soon. Your body is adjusting." Kale frowned. "Adjusting to what exactly?" Onari replied calmly. "To me." They reached a hollow set into the canyon wall, a shallow alcove shielded by stone and held in place by thick vines that looked half alive. Onari stepped inside first and placed her hand on the wall. The vines unraveled slowly, like they recognized her. The space within glowed faintly, lined with bioluminescent moss and old carved markings along the floor. Kale stepped in and blinked. "So you've got a glow cave?" Onari sat near the center and nodded. This place was sacred. "My ancestors built these shelters for the rite's early stages. It keeps the bond stable through the first dreams." Kale stopped in his tracks. "Hold up. Dreams?" Onari looked up at him. "The bond works across waking and sleep. Soon, your dreams will begin to mirror mine. That is how our instincts begin to sync." Kale slowly sank down onto the opposite wall. "You're saying I'm about to get haunted by alien fever dreams?" Onari tilted her head. "Not haunted. Shared. You will see fragments of my memories, and I will feel echoes of yours." Kale's jaw tightened slightly. "That's a bold assumption, considering what's rattling around in my head." Onari studied him for a long moment. "Pain leaves deep impressions. I expect some of your memories to be difficult." Kale didn't respond at first. He focused on a patch of glowing moss near his boot, then said, I didn't mean to be the last one here. I wasn't trying to be noble. Onari answered quietly. I never said you were. Kale looked up, surprised. Onari's voice remained even. You stayed. That is fact. Why you stayed matters only to you. He let out a breath and leaned back against the stone. The bond, whatever it was, had begun to itch beneath his ribs. Not painful, but present. Like a faint current tugging in two directions, toward something he didn't understand, and toward her. She was watching him again. Not with judgment, with curiosity. Kale met her eyes and asked, Have you done this before? Onari replied, No, this is my first season. I was trained to endure it, but I did not expect to be alone. Kale's voice softened. How close did you cut it? Before the others left, I mean. Onari looked down. 3 days. I thought I had time. But the storm came early, and the colony command declared emergency clearance. No one disobeys a final order. And you didn't tell anyone? I told my sister, she said, but she had 2 younglings to protect. She made the right choice. Kale nodded slowly. So you stayed behind and hoped. Onari's lips tightened, just a little. I prepared to die quietly. There was no drama in the statement, just clarity. Kale ran a hand through his hair. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not particularly graceful in life or death rituals. Onari looked at him calmly. I do not require grace, I require truth. He hesitated, then asked, And what if the truth is that I don't know what I'm doing? Then we begin there, she said. The cave quieted. Outside, the wind howled through the high canyon cliffs. The stars flickered between cracks in the stone above, casting dancing shadows over Onari's face. She leaned back against the opposite wall and closed her eyes. Kale watched her for a moment longer. He couldn't deny the growing pull, not just physical, but emotional. Something about her steadiness, her ability to say things that should be unbearable and still hold her head high, was magnetic. But it was more than that. It was how she looked at him, not as a curiosity or a threat, but as a person who had made a choice. Kale finally closed his eyes, and when the dream came, it hit like a flood. He was floating in water, deep green and endlessly warm, drifting through memories that weren't his. A mother brushing hair that shimmered like sunlight, a ceremonial hall carved into living stone, the echo of drums from beneath the ground. He saw Onari, younger, training with others like her, moving with precision through firelight and chanting voices. He felt her fear during her first transformation, the season's first signs, and the shame she never voiced when no one had been chosen for her. He felt her solitude, her aching, desperate need not just to bond, but to be seen. Kale jolted awake, gasping. His skin was damp, his heart pounding. Onari was watching him. She hadn't slept. Her voice was quiet. You saw something. Kale nodded, throat dry. Yeah, I saw you. I saw you as well, she said. Your father's face, a red sky. The wreckage, pain. Kale looked down. I didn't ask you to see that. Onari responded. You didn't have to. The bond carries truth, even when we don't speak it. Silence stretched between them again. Finally, Kale whispered, You weren't supposed to be alone. Onari replied just as softly, Neither were you. And this time, neither of them looked away. The next morning came like a breath held too long, dry, sharp, and crackling with the weight of things left unsaid. Kale stood outside the canyon shelter, blinking against the light. The dreams had left him shaken, not because they were violent, because they were intimate, too intimate. He wasn't just seeing memories, he was feeling them. The cool hands of Onari's mother, the burn of her first rite, the silent terror when she realized she'd been left behind, and the weight of her gaze the moment he woke. Now, he was restless, trying to walk it off. Behind him, Onari emerged from the mouth of the alcove, her movements silent as always. But today, something in her was different, looser at the shoulders, but tighter in the jaw. She was listening, sensing something. Kylie, Onari said, her voice low but alert. Stay close. Kyle turned, scanning the ridge. What is it? Onari stepped beside him. There's something nearby. I don't know what. Kyle squinted. The landscape was silent. No birds, no dust movement, just a wide stretch of cracked red rock and bone-colored shrubs, and then the silence broke. It came fast, a rustle, then a low hiss, and before he could move, a desert crawler the size of a dog burst from beneath a shaded ridge. Its hide was mottled green and sand-brown, covered in spikes, and its tongue lashed out like a whip of glass. Onari shouted, "Get back!" But Kale didn't. Instinct took over. He grabbed the metal pipe he'd strapped to his hip and swung as the creature lunged. The hit landed, but not before a hooked claw raked across his forearm. The crawler screeched, hissed, and vanished back into the rocks like smoke. Kale staggered, dropping the pipe. "Son of a—" Onari was already beside him, catching his arm. "Let me see." Kale winced as she inspected the wound. "Just a scratch." Onari's expression was unreadable. "That was a kethtal. The scratch is not the danger, it's the venom." Kale stared. "You could have led with that." She was already moving, reaching into a pouch at her waist, pulling a small blue vial. "Sit. Now." Kale dropped to the ground as his arm began to burn. The pain wasn't sharp, it was deep, spreading. "Is it lethal?" he asked, breathing faster. Onari didn't answer immediately. She uncorked the vial, poured its glowing contents onto the wound, and pressed her palm over it. Her skin lit briefly where it touched his, not just with light, with heat. A hum. Kale gasped. "What the hell is that?" Onari said. "Accelerated healing compound. But your body is not built for this venom. The bond will have to complete early." Kale blinked. "Wait. What?" Onari locked eyes with him. "The venom will keep spreading unless your cells adapt. That adaptation can only happen if the bond accelerates, if we merge now." He stared at her. "You mean this wasn't supposed to happen yet?" "No," Onari said. "But your body is already changing. The crystal's mark is awake. The venom will push it further. If we do not seal the bond fully, it will destabilize." Kale groaned. "This just keeps getting better." Onari reached into her pack and pulled out the crystal again. It no longer glowed faintly. Now it blazed, as if sensing his body in crisis. Kale said, "I'm not going to sprout wings or something, am I?" Onari didn't smile this time. "No. But your biology will begin to match mine in crucial ways. Immunity, respiration, even thought rhythm. It will not hurt." "That's comforting," Kale muttered, swaying slightly. She moved closer and knelt in front of him. Her voice lowered. "Kale, this is not what I wanted. But I will not let you die." His chest tightened. It wasn't just the venom, it was her, the way her hand steadied his shoulder, the faint tremble in her voice. For someone so composed, so practiced in control, Onari looked afraid. He reached up and touched her wrist. "Then do it." Her eyes widened. "You are sure?" Kale nodded. "You didn't ask to be alone, and I didn't ask to be bonded to a glowing jungle goddess in a survival horror simulation. But here we are." That almost earned a smile. Almost. Onari pressed the crystal gently to his chest again. This time the reaction was instant. The light surged through his body in a cascade of color, like liquid lightning. It sank into him, deeper than before. His limbs tensed and then released. Kale let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, and when he looked up, she was breathing with him, not just beside him, with him. The world blurred for a moment, not from pain, but from motion. The canyon disappeared, the sky flipped. He wasn't hallucinating. He was dreaming, but awake. He was standing in a field beneath twin moons. He could hear her heart. He could feel her hands, not physical, emotional. He saw her alone in a ship, staring at a frozen embryo chamber that would never activate because no match had been chosen in time. He felt her doubt, her shame, her longing. He felt her reaching for him, not with desperation, but with hope. And then he was back, on the ground, panting. Onari's voice broke through. "You are stabilized." Kale blinked. "What just happened?" "The bond sealed," she said. "Fully." He looked down at his arm. The scratch was gone, not just healed, but erased. Even the venom pain was gone. He sat in silence for a moment, then whispered, "Is this permanent?" Onari answered quietly, "Yes. My people call it the heir. Once completed, it is unbreakable." Kale looked up at her. "What does that make me now?" Onari tilted her head. "Part of me." She reached out slowly and touched the place where the crystal had disappeared into his skin. He didn't flinch. He didn't want to. He met her gaze and said, "So, now what?" Before she could answer, a sound echoed through the canyon. Metal. Distant. Heavy. Kale's body tensed. "Please tell me that's not another venomous bug." Onari rose quickly, her face shifting. "It is worse." He stood beside her. "Worse?" Onari's voice was grim. "My people. I recognize the sound of the scout ships. They've returned." Kale's jaw clenched. "You said they all left." "They did," Onari said. "But someone must have stayed behind. If they've tracked the bond—" She didn't finish the sentence, because both of them already knew. The sacred bond they had just sealed, human and alien, outsider and exile, wasn't just rare. It was forbidden. The scout ship landed with no ceremony, only silence. It touched down on the same ridge where everything had begun, a dark shape framed against the red dusk, its matte surface catching none of the dying light. No escorts, just a single figure stepping down the ramp. Kale stood beside Onari, his posture tense but rooted. She hadn't spoken since the ship appeared. Her fingers had merely curled slightly against her thigh, the only sign that she felt anything at all. As the figure approached, Kale saw the markings: silver jaw paint, ceremonial armor etched with old clan symbols. Whoever she wasn't just a scout. She was someone who still believed in hierarchy, even here. The woman stopped 5 paces from them. Her eyes locked on Onari, and her voice came cool and even. "You did not report the rite's failure." Onari didn't hesitate. "Because it did not fail." The woman's eyes moved to Kale. "He is human." "Yes," Onari replied, steady. Kale raised a hand slightly. "Still standing here, also breathing, which I'm told is unusual under the circumstances." The woman didn't acknowledge the comment. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer, then turned back to Onari. "That is not possible. The bond cannot take in your kind. Their minds are sealed, their biology incompatible." Kale crossed his arms. "Guess your crystal had a different opinion." The woman's tone grew colder. "No human has ever bonded. None were permitted during a season. The law never forbade it because it was believed impossible. That belief has protected us, until now." Onari stepped forward. "You were wrong." There was no malice in her voice, only truth. That made it worse. The woman replied, "Now we face consequences." Kale narrowed his eyes. "You're not here to understand. You're here to erase it." She didn't deny it. "The bond proves too much, that we are not singular in the rite, that the crystal responds to more than blood. If others see this, they will question everything." Kale shook his head. "So you're not afraid of what we did. You're afraid of what it means." She turned to him directly. "I am afraid of what it opens." Onari's voice cut through the air, sharper now. "Then exile us, or don't. But I will not cleanse this bond." The woman's expression hardened. "You were bred for the 7th line. Do you understand what you've given up?" Onari answered without flinching. "Everything. And I would do it again." The silence stretched between them like a blade balanced on edge. Then the woman spoke again, quieter now. "You have until dusk. After that you will no longer be protected. If you remain, you will be removed." She turned without another word, walking back toward the ship. The door sealed behind her. The craft lifted with a soft hum and disappeared over the canyon's edge, leaving only dust in its wake. Kale stood motionless for a long moment. So that was subtle. Onari looked out over the horizon, her voice calm. "That was mercy." Kale exhaled, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. "They're going to hunt us." "They won't find us," she said. "Not if we move now." He looked at her, studying the lines of her face, the clarity in her eyes, the strength in how she stood. She wasn't broken. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Kale asked quietly, "Do you regret it?" Onari turned to him, and her voice softened. "I was never meant to survive this season. I did not regret death. I will not regret living." Kale stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then let's make it worth something." They didn't run, not at first. For one long hour, Kale and Onari waited near the ridge, backs to the canyon wall, the silence between them heavy with what hadn't been said. The threat hadn't passed, it had just become official. Dusk was coming, and with it, the deadline. But the offer came sooner. A second ship landed, smaller, unmarked and quiet. From it emerged a different figure, older, wrapped in dark ceremonial fabric. Her steps were slow, less severe than the scouts, but no less purposeful. She introduced herself simply. "I am Yveth. I speak with the council's authority." Onari stood still. "You've come to deliver a sentence." Yveth looked between her and Kale. "Not yet. I've come to offer mercy." Kale's hand tightened slightly. He said nothing. Yveth's voice was soft, almost kind. "Your body has stabilized, Onari. The bond fulfilled its purpose. It protected your life through the season. The crystal's influence has waned. You will live. And in your next season, if you remain unbound, you may take a proper mate." Onari's eyes didn't flicker. "And him?" Yveth's tone didn't change. "The human cannot remain. If you relinquish the bond, he will be removed. Quietly. You will return to the rites, your name restored, no shame, no exile." Kale's heart pounded once in his chest. They were offering her everything, except him. Onari didn't move. She stared straight at the elder, as if measuring the weight of every word. "You said the bond has waned," Yveth nodded. "It no longer alters your biology. It is dormant." Onari shook her head, voice calm. "Then you misunderstand its purpose." Yveth narrowed her eyes. "Think carefully. This is your only chance to reclaim your standing." "I am not standing alone," Onari replied. She reached back and took Kale's hand, not out of fear, out of clarity. Yveth didn't answer. She simply turned and walked away. The ship lifted without another word. There was no announcement, no formal exile, just the quiet weight of a decision that could not be undone. Kale stood in the fading light, the wind rising around them as the sun dipped below the stone ridge. He looked at her for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "Why me?" Onari didn't look away. "Because you stayed." He gave a small smile. "That wasn't exactly a heroic decision. I had no ship, no way out." "You could have surrendered," she said. "Given the crystal back, walked away. You didn't." Kale was quiet for a moment, then said, "I didn't think I mattered that much." Onari reached up and touched the place over his heart, where the crystal's glow had first appeared. "You mattered enough to change everything they believed, and enough to change me." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "So what now?" Her voice was steady. "We leave. We find a place where our names are not warnings." Kale looked out over the stars rising in the east. "Think there's a place like that?" "I do," she said. "And if there isn't, we'll make one." They turned toward the transport ship hidden in the canyon, patched together by Kale's salvaging, powered now by defiance and shared resolve. The engines lit as they climbed aboard, casting long shadows across the stone. As they ascended into the sky, the world behind them faded into distance. Exile, maybe, but not loss, because what began as survival had become something more, something earned. And somewhere, beyond the silence of their homeworld, a future was waiting for them to claim it.